Imagine one company that owns a piece of almost everything you touch. Your home, your pension, your food, even the company you work for. It doesn't have a storefront. It doesn't make a product. It doesn't advertise. And yet it is the single largest shareholder in Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google. It manages more money than the GDP of every country on Earth. Combined, $10 trillion. The name of this company, BlackRock. Most people have never heard of it. But it's been quietly shaping your world for over 30 years. How does one company get this powerful? Who controls it? And what does it mean for the rest of us? Today, we're going inside the most powerful company you've never heard of. This is the secret empire of BlackRock. It started not with billions, but with a phone and a rented office. 1988, New York City. A 38-year-old bond trader named Larry Fink founds a company with 8 partners and 0 clients. His idea was simple but revolutionary: manage risk better than anyone else. At the time, most investors flew blind. They'd pour money into bonds and hope for the best. Fink built a proprietary system called Aladdin, a risk analytics engine that could model millions of scenarios simultaneously. Think of it like a weather forecast, but for money. For your money. For everyone's money. And governments noticed. During the 2008 financial crisis, the U.S. government called BlackRock, not the other way around. BlackRock was handed $130 billion to manage the wreckage of Bear Stearns, AIG, and Fannie Mae. At that moment, the empire was born. So how exactly does BlackRock work? What does it actually do? BlackRock is what's known as an asset manager. It doesn't own your money outright. It manages it on behalf of others. Those others include pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, university endowments, insurance companies, and central banks. Here's the metaphor that makes it click. Imagine the world's richest people hire one property manager for all their buildings. That manager doesn't own the buildings, but he decides which tenants get in, which repairs happen, which buildings get sold. That's BlackRock, except the buildings are companies, thousands of them. Through its index funds and ETFs, BlackRock holds shares in virtually every major publicly traded company on Earth. When you invest in a basic S&P 500 index fund, there's a good chance BlackRock is running it. Their iShares ETF brand alone holds over $3 trillion. That's more than the entire GDP of France. But here's where it gets interesting, because managing money is only half the story. Remember Aladdin? That risk software Fink built in 1988. Today, Aladdin monitors more than $21 trillion in assets for BlackRock and for its competitors. Yes, BlackRock sells its risk brain to rival firms. It's the plumbing that runs the entire financial system. And then there's the third layer, policy. BlackRock's executives have served as U.S. Treasury officials, central bank advisors, and White House economic counselors. The line between the world's largest money manager and the world's governments isn't just blurry. In some cases, it barely exists. During COVID-19, the Federal Reserve paid BlackRock to manage its corporate bond buying program. The U.S. government hired the world's biggest bond investor to buy bonds on behalf of the government. If that sounds like the fox guarding the henhouse, you're not alone in thinking so. BlackRock also uses its enormous voting power to influence how companies are run. As a top 3 shareholder in most S&P 500 companies, BlackRock's vote on executive pay, board members, and climate policy can change outcomes. Think about that. One firm casting decisive votes across thousands of companies simultaneously. This is what academics call common ownership, and some economists argue it quietly reduces competition. If the same company profits, whether Pepsi or Coke wins, does either really need to compete? The answer, some researchers say, No, and the prices you pay might reflect it. But BlackRock says it's just a passive investor, that it doesn't run companies, it just holds shares. The debate over where passive investing ends and control begins is one of the defining economic questions of our time, and right now, that debate is reaching a breaking point. In 2022, the empire started facing its first real fire. BlackRock had become a lightning rod for political anger from both the left and the right. On the left, environmental groups accused it of greenwashing, talking about climate, but still funding fossil fuels. On the right, Republican politicians accused BlackRock of using ESG investing to impose a so-called woke agenda on businesses. 19 Republican-led states announced they would pull billions from BlackRock-managed funds. Texas alone passed a law restricting state pension funds from working with firms that boycott oil and gas. The very thing that made BlackRock untouchable its size had also made it a target. Larry Fink, who'd spent years writing letters to CEOs about climate and social responsibility, suddenly went quiet on those topics. In 2024, BlackRock stopped using the word ESG in its official communications entirely. What happened? Did the world's most powerful investor just blink? Meanwhile, at home, BlackRock was being blamed for something even more personal: the U.S. housing crisis. Viral posts claimed BlackRock was buying up single-family homes across America, pricing ordinary buyers out of the market. The truth was more nuanced and in some ways more unsettling. BlackRock itself does not own single-family homes directly, but a company it helped create, Invitation Homes, does. Invitation Homes became one of the largest single-family rental companies in America, owning over 80,000 homes. BlackRock provided the initial capital, then it sold its stake. It made a profit. The housing shortage remained. Renters got the bill. Whether BlackRock caused the housing crisis is debatable. Whether it profited from it is not. And this is the central paradox of BlackRock. It is simultaneously too important to fail, too powerful to fight, and too diffuse to easily blame. It's not a villain in a Hollywood movie. There's no mustache to twirl. It's a system, and systems don't have faces. But they do have consequences. And now, with more regulatory scrutiny than ever before, BlackRock faces a choice: continue growing at the center of the global financial system, or get cut down to size by governments who fear what it has become. As of today, the outcome is uncertain, but the pressure is real and rising. Let's talk about what all of this actually means for you. If you have a pension, a 401k, or any retirement savings, there's a significant chance BlackRock is managing part of it. That's not necessarily bad. BlackRock's index funds are among the cheapest in the world. They've made investing accessible to millions. For the average person, BlackRock has probably made retirement savings more affordable. But here's the catch. The same affordability that helps individuals also concentrates enormous power in one firm. When $10 trillion of the world's savings votes on corporate behavior, and that vote is cast by one institution, democracy inside capitalism starts to look different. Think about your local utility company, your bank, or pharmacy, the airline you fly. In all likelihood, BlackRock is a top 3 shareholder in every single one of them. This is called systemic importance, and it's the reason regulators around the world are starting to panic. In Europe, the EU's financial watchdog put BlackRock on its radar as a potential systemically important financial institution. That's the same label given to banks too big to fail after 2008. If BlackRock ever stumbled, the shockwaves would ripple through every corner of the global economy. Think 2008. But instead of mortgage-backed securities, imagine the disruption running through the index funds in everyone's retirement account. That scenario has never happened, but the International Monetary Fund has wargamed it, and BlackRock's own Aladdin System would be tasked with managing that crisis. The same system that created the concentration of risk is the only system capable of managing it. Then there's climate. For years, BlackRock pledged to lead on sustainable investing. Larry Fink's annual letter told CEOs climate risk is investment risk. Environmental groups hailed it as a turning point. A $10 trillion fund putting climate on the boardroom agenda. But BlackRock still voted against the majority of climate-related shareholder resolutions. It still held positions in ExxonMobil, Shell, and Saudi Aramco. Its reasoning: divestment doesn't reduce emissions, engagement does. Critics call that a convenient excuse to keep fossil fuel profits flowing while wearing a green badge. The reality is probably somewhere in between, but the consequences of getting it wrong are planetary. Meanwhile, the geopolitical dimension of BlackRock's empire is just beginning to emerge. BlackRock moved aggressively into China. Even as U.S.-China tensions escalated, it became the first foreign firm allowed to operate a fully owned mutual fund business in China. U.S. lawmakers demanded answers. How can an American firm manage U.S. pension money while also funding Chinese state companies? BlackRock says it builds walls between its divisions. Critics say those walls are made of paper. And then there's AI. BlackRock has invested billions into AI companies and infrastructure, including Microsoft, NVIDIA, and its own AI-powered investing tools. It recently launched a $30 billion fund to build data centers and AI infrastructure. If AI reshapes the global economy, and most experts believe it will, BlackRock has positioned itself to be at the center of that transition too. Which brings us back to the original question: how much power is too much power? BlackRock's defenders say capital needs to be efficiently allocated. Index funds democratized investing. Someone has to do this job. BlackRock's critics say no single private institution should wield this level of influence over the global economy, elected or otherwise. And somewhere in the middle are the rest of us, putting money into retirement accounts, paying rent, watching prices rise, wondering why nothing seems to change. Maybe BlackRock is just a mirror reflecting the inequalities already built into the system. Or maybe it's an accelerant making those inequalities worse, faster. The honest answer is we don't know yet. What we do know is that systems this powerful tend to resist being dismantled. They become infrastructure. And once something becomes infrastructure, you stop noticing it until it breaks. So, what should we make of BlackRock? It is not a conspiracy. It is a consequence of decades of financial deregulation, the rise of passive investing, and the failure of governments to anticipate what too big to fail could really look like. BlackRock didn't steal power. He gave it to them one index fund at a time. Every retirement account that moved to a cheap BlackRock index fund made total sense. Individually, collectively, those rational decisions created the most powerful financial institution in history. That's not a crime, but it is a problem. Know where your money is. Ask questions. Understand which companies your index fund is funding, because informed citizens are the only real check on systems this large. The real question isn't whether BlackRock is good or evil. The real question is, should any single institution, public or private, elected or not, have this much influence over the lives of billions of people? And if the answer is no, then what are we going to do about it? That's not rhetorical, because every day we wait, the empire gets a little bigger. If that made you think, drop a comment below. Do you think firms like BlackRock are good for ordinary investors, or have we built something we can no longer control? The debate is just beginning, and your voice matters more than you think.